Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on the impact of the European Green Deal on e-commerce. And my name is Aline Mulyk. I'm working as Public Affairs Manager for European and International Affairs at bevh, and I'm very happy to be your host today. As you all know, the European Union, the Commission, is aiming at having a carbon neutral continent by 2050, and therefore made a couple of proposals already under the Green Deal that will, of course, have a quite huge impact on the entire industry. However, there are a couple of proposals and plans that are more targeted to e-commerce and will have direct implications for our industry. And this is what we'll be looking at today. And I'm very happy to do this together with Luca Cassetti, who is the Secretary General of Ecommerce Europe, our umbrella association in Brussels. Welcome, Luca.
Thank you very much, Aline.
In a couple of seconds, you will start giving us an overview about Ecommerce Europe's activities in the field of sustainability. Then we'll look at the Green Deal in general, and then into those plans and proposals that are directly impacting e-commerce, as I was just saying. As we're a rather small group today, and as European Commission proposals are known for being quite heavy, Luca and me decided to have this webinar rather in form of a conversation than a one-way presentation. This means that we decided to split the webinar up into like smaller, more digestible parts. And I will start basically having a short Q&A with Luca after each section. And I invite everybody of you to participate in this. So please feel free to share all your concerns, your comments, and obviously ask all the questions you might have. And with this, I would hand it over to you, Luca. Thank you very much for being with us once again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Aline, for the introduction, and thank you very much to bevh for having organized this conference and for having invited me to join you and to give a presentation on the impact of the European Green Deal on e-commerce. I'll do my best to replace my colleague Juliette, who is the real expert and policy lead on the sustainability work of Ecommerce Europe. So if I receive some questions that I cannot fully address, I would be happy to take note of those and then come back to you in writing if that's necessary. So maybe a little bit of an introduction on Ecommerce Europe before we start diving into the various sustainability files. So Ecommerce Europe is the association that is representing 150,000 companies that are selling goods and or services online to consumers in Europe. A bit more than a couple of years ago, we merged with Imota. So we now have, as a single voice representing e-commerce, 24 national associations. One is, of course, bevh, coming from 21 European countries. Besides national associations, we do allow also corporate members to be part of our organization, as well as business partners. So mostly logistics providers, which will be impacted in one way or the other by the sustainability plans of the European Commission, but also payments providers and also associative partners. So this is in a nutshell the membership of Ecommerce Europe. Ecommerce Europe, whose focus is 99%, I would say, public affairs. So that's what we do. We do lobbying in the European Union at European Union level from Brussels on several key files. You can see some of the key files in here. We have data protection, we have consumer policy, digital transactions, of course, the sustainability, very relevant for today, but also taxation issues, competition issues, e-logistics, platforms issues. So basically everything that is more or less directly related to e-commerce or which has an impact on e-commerce could actually be potentially a focus area for our organization. Maybe it's good for you to understand a little bit what are Ecommerce Europe's objectives, because what we ultimately want to achieve is to create a legislative framework for European companies to flourish and to allow innovation and stimulate digital and sustainable development. In our opinion, the European Union should put a little bit more effort maybe in removing the remaining barriers to cross-border e-commerce, which is still quite complicated, especially for SMEs. And in that sense, the challenges that we face, one of them is having clear and principle-based and balanced and proportionate rules, which is something that that often is lacking in European legislation. Ultimately, what we want to create is a seamless shopping experience for consumers, where the distinction between online and offline is basically becoming more and more irrelevant. We want to alleviate regulatory burdens, which is something that the pandemic has also strengthened even more. So the need to further reduce these regulatory burdens. And what we advocate for is basically easy to understand rules, more harmonized European rules, and of course, better enforcement, because enforcement is key, especially when we talk about players that are not based in the European Union, but that target their activities to the European consumers. And at the end, you know, innovative technologies such as artificial intelligence can, of course, play their role. And of course, we have to facilitate the uptake of these technologies by avoiding excessively burdensome European rules. So that's in a nutshell what we are asking for. Maybe going a little bit more into the sustainability topics of e-commerce Europe, we do have a working committee that is dedicated to sustainability issues. It has been created in January 2020. And here you can see two people that are behind basically this working committee. One is Christoph Wenck-Fischer from bevh, who is the chair of the working committee. So showing also that bevh is widely involved in sustainability topics together with the other national associations of e-commerce Europe and some other corporate members. And then Juliette, who is the lead on sustainability and basically dealing with public affairs for the European Association. The ambition of this working committee, so the reasons why we decided to create it, was to build expertise and share knowledge on the relationship between e-commerce, digitalization, and sustainability. So ultimately, what we want is to be able to carry the voice of the e-commerce industry in the discussions on the European Green Deal, and at the same time, try to address some misconceptions, meaning demystifying wrong assumptions with regards to e-commerce and its impact on the environment, because what we need is a fact-based legislation. So we don't need to have legislation based on assumptions. We need legislation based on facts. So that's very important, and that's what the working committee is actually there to deal with. So these are some of our tools. So basically, what we create within this working committee is position papers. So positions that are on potentially single issues like EPR, for example. We'll discuss about that later on, or maybe a little bit broader on circular economy. We have other publications next to the position papers that are more targeted to policymakers. And in particular, we have the collaborative report, and I will touch upon that in a minute. And we also have some campaigns, so some video and social media material that we really use to amplify basically our asks and our work within the Sustainability Working Committee. I think it's worth to spend a minute mentioning the collaborative report on sustainability and e-commerce. This is something that we have done with e-commerce Europe's members, so with their cooperation. bevh also participated in this exercise, so it's very much appreciated. Basically, what we have done was very simple. We asked our members to share information, studies, best practices, so anything that actually can be useful as a source of information for other businesses, but also for policymakers across the EU. And the aim is, again, a little bit linked with the general aim of the working committee, is to shed light on the role that e-commerce plays today, but also the role it can play tomorrow while we are all moving towards a more sustainable future. So what we are really trying to do with this collaborative report, and we already have 2 editions of this report, is to provide research and examples that can actually inform the debate on these issues. Debates that are often still detached from the reality on the ground and that are influenced sometimes by political perception rather than concrete facts. So if you're interested in the collaborative report on sustainability and e-commerce, it's freely available on our website and you can download it from there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luca, for this overview and introduction into e-commerce Europe's work in the field of sustainability. As you can see, BVH is highly involved in this work, also personally, with Christoph and Krisha, our Secretary General, who is chairing the Sustainability Committee. And obviously, for us, it is very important to feed your expertise, your practical experiences into the work of e-commerce Europe so that they can take informed positions in the legislative process. And I would like to take this opportunity to encourage all of you to share your expertise, your concerns and comments with us during this webinar.
I will not bother you a lot on the EU ordinary legislative procedure, but this is an oversimplified overview of how it works, normally speaking, in the European Union. So we basically have a legislative proposal, which can be a directive or a regulation of the European Union that is published and proposed by the European Commission. If we are under the ordinary legislative procedure, which is the most common one, this proposal will be sent to the European Parliament and to the Council of the European Union, which are the so-called co-legislators and which have to both agree on the text of the proposal. And once that happens, then we do have an adopted legal text. A regulation is directly applicable in the European Union. A directive needs to be transposed in the member state, basically by means of a national act. So that's in a nutshell, really oversimplified the legislative procedure in the European Union. Now going a little bit more into the topic of today, I would like to start with the European Green Deal. The European Commission is not only making legislative proposals, as I mentioned before, but they're also making communications. And one of these communications is indeed the European Green Deal, which was published in December 2020 and is one of the 6 European Commission's priorities for the mandate from 2019 to 2024. The communication is including both legislative and non-legislative initiatives. And the general aim of the European Green Deal is to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050, and basically improving the well-being and health of citizens and future generations by providing what you see in this slide: fresh air, clean water, healthy soil and biodiversity, renovated energy efficient buildings, more public transport, and so on and so on. Not everything that you're seeing in this slide is actually relevant for e-commerce or will have an impact on our industry, but some of these initiatives will for sure have a more or less direct impact on merchants, not only merchants, also marketplaces, and also the suppliers, so the parcel delivery and postal delivery companies. So I think it's important to keep our eyes very well open on everything that the European Commission will come up to in the coming months, because even if the European Commission is not targeting e-commerce specifically, it can always happen that the European Parliament or the Council of the EU during the legislative procedure will decide to address e-commerce in one way or the other. So that's why e-commerce Europe and its members like bevh and all the others are trying to be as vigilant as possible on these files that will be on the table of the policymakers. Out of the various work streams that are part of the European Green Deal, those that we believe are relevant are mobilizing industry for a clean and circular economy, accelerating the shift to sustainable and smart mobility, and mobilizing research and fostering innovation. So these are the 3 main work streams on which we are focusing our attention at Ecommerce Europe. Within the European Green Deal, there have been already some initiatives that were announced by the European Commission. And here you can see some examples of the most relevant ones. It can go from developing requirements to ensure that all packaging in the European market is reusable or recyclable in an economically viable manner by 2030, or measures to encourage businesses to offer and to allow consumers to choose their reusable, durable, and repairable products. This is also linked to the right to repair, and this is something that we will address a little bit more in detail later on. There can be initiatives also on a better and more reliable information to consumers. For example, the Green Deal is mentioning regulatory and non-regulatory efforts to tackle false green claims. And of course, the role that new technologies and digitalization can play via digital product passports, which is another aspect that we will touch upon later on. There is also an initiative that is mentioned on sustainable transport to reduce emissions. So all these are somehow linked or will have an impact on the e-commerce industry. So we started in December 2020 with the EU Green Deal, which was the, let's say, overarching strategy of the European Commission. Then the Commission went a little bit more into the details with an action plan that was published in March 2020, again announcing various initiatives in the circular economy field. And here you see again some of the most relevant ones based on three pillars: a sustainable product policy framework, measures on key product value chains, and actions to have less waste and more value. So these are the three main elements that we selected within the Circular Economy Action Plan of the European Commission. Starting from the first one, there would be initiatives to establish sustainability principles to regulate aspects of products like repairability, recycled content, carbon and environmental footprint, or single use. On the second one, on the measures on key product value chains, the European Commission is looking at electronics and ICT with their Circular Electronics Initiative, which is supposed to promote longer product lifetimes, for example, through reusability and repairability and upgradability of components, but also softwares of products to avoid the issue of premature obsolescence. So this looks a lot like a producer issue, I would say, more than a merchant issue, but you know, merchants can always be in some way, maybe a little bit more indirectly called into the scope. Then we have initiatives on packaging, for example, the reinforcement of the mandatory essential requirements for packaging, inclusive actions on waste reduction, initiatives on design for the reuse and the recyclability and the complexity of packaging materials. Plastics is also something quite important that the Commission is trying to address with mandatory requirements for recycled content and waste reduction measures for key products. And of course, one of them is packaging, which is quite relevant for our industry. Textiles is also quite important for the European Commission. They came up actually with a European strategy for textiles with the objective of boosting the European market for sustainable and circular textile. The last batch is basically on enhancing waste policy in support of waste prevention and circularity. For example, by introducing waste reduction targets for specific streams, which can be batteries, packaging again, maybe a little bit less relevant for us, end-of-life vehicles and electronic equipment. And also the announcement of a proposal for a European-wide harmonized model for separate collection of waste and labeling to facilitate this separate collection. The idea of the Commission is also to act on secondary raw materials, and actually what they want to do is to create a well-functioning internal market for that. So these are some of the initiatives that have been announced in the Circular Economy Action Plan, which is one of the actions that are part of the European Green Deal, together with another batch of proposals, another package of proposals, which is called the Fit for 55 package. And the Fit for 55 package, sorry, it's a very difficult name to pronounce, is something a little bit more recent, published in July 2021, as a general goal, the 27 European countries committed to have the European Union as the first climate neutral continent by 2050. So basically all industries will have to contribute to this, and also consumers will have to contribute to this. Why do they call it Fit for 55? They call it Fit for 55 because they want to reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to the 1990 levels. So what the European Commission is actually aiming to is to create new opportunities for innovation and investment at the same time, as well as reducing emissions, creating jobs and growth, addressing energy poverty, reduce external energy dependency, and improve the health and well-being of European citizens, basically. Some of the main objectives of the Fit for 55 package, or some of the main initiatives, I would say, that have been announced by the European Commission. First, they would like to increase costs for using polluting fuels. And this would lead to an overhaul of how not only people, but also businesses drive, insulate their buildings, produce materials, and manage their land, basically. The Commission also wants to set higher targets for energy efficiency, renewables, and renovations, and expand the EU carbon market to cover maritime shipping and tighten requirements for the power and industry sector, and also want to set up a separate emission trading system for the road transport and building sectors. And finally, also introduce a new carbon border levy on polluting imports. And that goes a little bit hand in hand with the level playing field argument of the European Union that we have seen also in other legislative proposals, basically making sure that European merchants are at the same level of non-European based merchants, because European merchants have a lot of rules that they have to comply with, and sometimes players based outside the European Union, they do not comply in the same way. So it's all about the level playing field also in the environmental discussions.
Thank you very much for this overview of the whole Green Deal, basically, and all the proposals that are out there already. And I would suggest that after these files that you presented, that will have for sure also an impact on e-commerce, as they will for the whole and entire industry. We'll now look at the proposals or plans of the Commission you brought for us that are more specifically directed to e-commerce companies.
Yes, thank you, Aline. This is becoming indeed a little bit more concrete for the e-commerce sector. With the upcoming initiatives from the European Commission, this is just an overview. We will go through each of these in the coming slides, starting with packaging. Because by end 2021, the European Commission aims to come up with a revision of the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive. So what the Commission is doing right now is performing an assessment of a set of measures to reinforce essential requirements for packaging. The European Commission has been carrying studies also through the work of external consultancies, basically to understand a little bit how this Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive should be revised. And in the preliminary results of these studies, e-commerce is actually identified as a growth factor, especially in the use of cardboard. And there are also instances of excess packaging. And here we can mention functionally necessary packaging, but also suboptimal sometimes in terms of weight and volume. And that's what the preliminary results are showing. So e-commerce is clearly, let's say, a target of this initiative. And if we look at the potential actions that would be on the table, we don't know for sure because the proposal is not there yet, but there are proposals of having a 40% void space ratio for e-commerce, maybe a new definition of over-packaging, new performance criteria. There is also maybe some actions to reduce the average weight of packagings placed on the market, maybe also introducing weight limits or maximum void empty space limits, a sort of threshold. But there is also more harmonization that would come, for example, on EPR reporting, on EPR fee modulation criteria, and also some other initiatives like the creation of packaging registries. So it's a patchwork of different potential actions that have been proposed to the European Commission by the consultant. So we have to see what will actually make its way to the final legislative proposal. Linked to packaging is, of course, also extended producer responsibility that I mentioned before, which is seen by the Commission as a tool to accompany the transition to a circular economy. According to the European Union and member states in general, EPR can play a role in supporting the growth or more sustainable practices throughout the life cycle of a product. In terms of pros and cons that we have identified as e-commerce Europe, well, pros, successful EPR schemes are leading to improvements in this sector for sure. But as cons, we see new rules, we see different approaches, we see different practices that are leading to severe fragmentation between European countries and sometimes also within the same European country. The obvious consequence of this fragmentation is that there are increasing burdens, there is an increasing complexity for companies to contribute and to meet their obligations in terms of EPR. So that's why Ecommerce Europe and its members are asking for an overhaul of EPR rules in the European Union. And we have published a position paper on this specific issue.
Yeah, thank you very much for this first two files that you brought for us this afternoon. Maybe let's dive a bit deeper into these two topics that are interlinked. I mean, looking at this video, it becomes quite clear that the harmonization of these national EPR schemes at EU level would have a big benefit for especially SMEs selling cross-border. And I would just be interested if you see any hope or already concrete signs that the European Commission is looking into this and wants to overhaul the EPR schemes.
That's what we would love to see, of course. Thanks, Aline, for the question. It is a bit difficult to assess when the European Commission will exactly propose a more thorough overhaul of EPR, possibly because of the wide national differences and how difficult it would be to get member states actually to agree on the new rules in Council and actually implement them. EPR is, as I said before, prominently mentioned as a tool to reduce waste, notably in upcoming files like the Sustainable Initiative, Sustainable Product Initiative, but it's very difficult for now for us to assess when the Commission will actually propose a more thorough overhaul of EPR, unfortunately. That's also why we created this campaign, actually, and that's why we have pushed out a position paper and we try to raise the awareness on the costs of dealing with EPR and the cost of fragmentation, actually, because we want to put the European Commission to take the responsibility and actually act on this.
When we look at EPR, or also at even more in particular on the packaging side, we see that there is always this focus on e-commerce on the side of the European Commission. Do you know, or can you explain why this is the case and where it comes from, maybe?
You mean the focus on e-commerce, the specific focus on e-commerce?
Focus on e-commerce when it comes to EPR or packaging.
Yeah, I would say that it's maybe linked to what I said before, the perceptions and the misconceptions, thinking that e-commerce is polluting much more than retail, or this kind of assumptions. I mean, I think that there is a lot to do for us at European level and for you and as bevh and other national associations all over Europe in the network of Ecommerce Europe to really educate policymakers about e-commerce and how e-commerce works, because e-commerce, if done properly, can be very green. The fact that you see a van that is driving in the city center, or many vans that are driving in the city center, doesn't mean that it's polluting per se. a van that is circulating in a city center is, of course, carrying a lot of parcels, parcels that probably the end consumer would have bought from a physical shop, if not on e-commerce, maybe even using his diesel car to get to the shop, maybe not finding what he wanted in that shop and go to another shop. But I don't want to make this an online versus offline debate, because this is not what it is about. This is really something we want to avoid, this cleavage between online and offline, which is coming back in the European Commission, as you just said, the focus on e-commerce. Why focusing on e-commerce? We should just focus on retail in general, and actually combining e-commerce with brick and mortar retail is the key to become more green and to go towards this digital and sustainable twin transition. So yeah, I think the focus, this focus that we are seeing from the Commission and also from member states is probably due to misconceptions, perceptions, and hopefully there will be more studies out there that would actually help us in counter these arguments. There is a study that was made by Eunomia a few months ago that is actually dealing with this. It's very interesting to read, so I would invite you to read it if you didn't. I think we have a direct link on our website. Otherwise, we can put it in the chat later on. But yeah, I would say education is key.
Yeah, that would be also very much linked to my next question. Actually, you were like explaining the concrete plans or the presumed concrete plans of the Commission regarding packaging, and that they are discussing having thresholds for the void space in a package, and the ratio that was set at 40%. Can you maybe a bit explain how the Commission is coming up with such an idea, and what the process is behind this whole thing?
Yeah. So the proposal that you just mentioned is just one of many, and this is all part of an early process of assessment that is done either by the European Commission directly or through consultancies that are actually supporting the European Commission in these studies to work on reviewing the rules on packaging. So we don't know exactly from where these ideas and these numbers come from, but many stakeholders, including Ecommerce Europe and also national players, also consumer organizations and environmental organizations, NGOs, they all participate in these studies that are performed by the consultancies, by the European Commission. So what the consultancy is trying to do is to put everything together and give it as a bulk to the European Commission. And then it will be up to the European Commission to assess whether these measures, specifically the one on void thresholds, would actually be included in the final proposal. So it is our job as Ecommerce Europe, together with our members, to advocate maybe for more flexible measures than imposing a very fixed threshold like this one. So that's what we will have to do when the proposal will be out. We will have to prepare, consult our members, and that's why it is important that also BVH members are involved in this process, because ultimately they will have to comply with this. So the more concrete experiences we get through your members and through other companies directly to Ecommerce Europe, that is going to help us in countering the consultancy arguments or the Commission arguments if they do not make any sense at all.
Yeah, we'll do our best to contribute to this, and also to allow Ecommerce Europe to take a very, very informed position on what is also possible from a practical point of view. Maybe just to go one step further, are there already any plans out there how the Commission is planning to enforce this threshold? Maybe this is also relevant for considering the position we'll take on this.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and a tricky argument as well, because enforcement is an issue. I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we want to have better enforcement, and this is something that industry participants And it's a challenge that the Commission will have to address. We don't know exactly how they will address it, but for us, what it is, okay, it's already complicated to do enforcement within the European Union. Imagine how complicated that will be if and how these rules will apply to sellers established in third countries, which from a level playing field perspective, it would make sense to have that, because if European merchants are complying with these rules, why shouldn't non-EU based merchants? So in my opinion, they should be on the same level. But how to do that in practice, how to enforce new packaging regulations for products entering the EU market, this is more complicated to address. If I can maybe draw a parallel with product safety and national authorities that are responsible for for checking compliance of product safety with product safety regulations in the EU, these authorities are often understaffed, under-resourced. They don't have the material means to perform these checks on product safety. And I'm a little bit afraid that if we want to create a fair system and also third country-based sellers will have to comply with this, yeah, then we have to beef up really the controllers, the authorities that will be carrying these checks. So it's a tricky question to address. So I don't know exactly how the European Commission will solve this. They might even think about making platforms liable for checking compliance, but that would, bring into scope just a segment of the market and not all the sellers based outside the European Union that would target the European Union directly without the use of a marketplace. So it's to be seen. I cannot give you a clear answer on this one, unfortunately.
All right, so we'll wait and see what the Commission is coming up with. I think we can move on to the next one, which will sound familiar, I guess, to a lot of our participants today, because you know it from the German level already, the supply chain law, the Lieferkettengesetz, that is also in the pipeline at European level. And I'm very curious what you're going to tell us, Luca.
Sustainable corporate governance and due diligence. We expect it to come on the 8th of December 2021. This proposal has been delayed a few times already. It seems a little bit complicated for the Commission to come up with the final text, I would say. So there is a twofold objective for this proposal. One is with regards to supply chain due diligence, with potentially new requirements for companies to ensure due diligence across the whole value chain. And in that sense, as you say, Daline, it will likely be inspired from the German supply chain law. And there is pressure from the SPD for an even more ambitious EU proposal compared to the German one. So potentially this will go beyond what you have in Germany. And then the second objective is linked to sustainable corporate governance with the aim of improving the EU regulatory framework on company law and corporate governance, for example, by introducing new corporate directors' duties to integrate, for example, mandatory sustainability criteria into their decision making. The scope is still being determined, but this proposal could impact large companies as well as SMEs operating in sectors that might be categorized as high risk by the European Commission. So I would say this is a proposal that we really have to keep an eye on because of its possible impact on retail for due diligence obligations, reporting, changes in civil liability to make sure that these new rules are enforceable and so on. I don't know if you want me to go a little bit more in detail, otherwise.
Yeah, maybe you because you were mentioning that it's very likely that it goes beyond the German law. Do you know already in how far this will be the case? So in what way we go beyond, and what happens to the German law if there is a European solution?
Yeah, we can speculate a bit on that, of course. So the scope is still under consideration. So we will know for sure only when the European Commission will come up with the proposal. And it's a topic of a lot of discussions, and that's why we also have this delay, I would say. Of course, there is a change in the German government, so this will have an impact. I said it before, SPD is willing to go beyond the existing German law proposal and maybe go back to what actually was on the table originally in Germany. I think that the EU proposal would probably focus a little bit more on environment, and that's compared to the current German law that you have now. And what will happen to the German law once the European law is adopted? Well, normally speaking, the German law should be repealed. Then it all depends on how the European Union will decide to legislate on this. It can be a regulation, so in that case, it will be directly applicable in the European Union, including Germany. So you repeal what you have at national level and you apply the European legislation. If it is a directive, then you have to transpose it in national legislation. Maybe it can be done through amendments to your current law in Germany. It's to be seen, but the idea of having a European proposal is actually to avoid that Germany and potentially, I mean, Germany has already done a law, but it's to avoid that other countries will follow the example of Germany, come up with a similar law, and then another country is following and another one is following, and we create a mess with a lot of fragmentation in the single market that is definitely a barrier to expand cross-border in Europe. So that's something we don't want. So the European proposal should bring more harmonization in that sense.
I think we also should move on to the next proposal or plan of the Commission. That was also delayed as far as I know, right?
Yes, that's an interesting one. So it was delayed. We are talking about the Sustainable Product Initiative now. It was expected early next year. Then the European Commission published its work program for 2022. This proposal is not in there, but yesterday somebody from the cabinet of the commissioner in charge of the proposal mentioned that it should come in the first quarter of 2022. So we expect this in the first quarter of 2022. Again, we have a proposal whose objective is twofold. Starting from sustainable products, the proposal would most likely ensure that the products placed on the European market are more durable, reusable, repairable, recyclable, and energy efficient. The proposal would focus on key product categories, for example, ICT, textiles, steel, and cement. Most likely, this proposal will be complemented by a specific initiative on a right to repair that we will address in a second. And alongside the Sustainable Product Initiative, or part of the Digital Product Initiative, there will be also something with regards to the creation of a digital product passport. Digital product passport that is supposed to improve the disclosure of information to market actors along the value chains. It's basically an infrastructure that would be created to basically have a unique product identifier linked to this digital product passport with all the relevant information about the product. So it will be probably about connecting various decentralized and existing databases accessible to actors based on their needs and, of course, right to access. Just continue with the right to repair, which is linked to this proposal, because this is also a very interesting one, and we don't know exactly the impact it would have on e-commerce, on merchants. Again, we can only speculate about the possible elements, but we cannot speculate on the fact that this will be a legislative initiative, part of the work program of the European Commission for next year, in Q3 2022. So what the Commission is looking at, as far as we understand it and as far as we know, is complementary measures to improve the repairability of products and consumers' ability to repair these products. It's maybe interesting to mention that from the European Parliament side, we have seen some movements because the Parliament is specifically asking the Commission to act in this field and, for example, to create a uniform repair score, which is similar to what you see in the slide, which is the indice de réparabilité that is been introduced in France since 1st January 2021. and also include some specific elements in the right to repair that, in the Parliament's opinion, should be part of it. It's going from extended life cycle of products to access to spare parts, access to affordable repair services for consumers, also measures to provide free of charge access to repair and maintenance information, including information on spare parts and software updates to all market participants, which means no hindrances for all actors of the repair sector. There might also be something on a mandatory minimum period of time for the availability of spare parts and or updates. So this seems very much a, I would say, a producer issue, although we cannot be sure that, you know, merchants would also be involved in some ways, as it is often the case. And yeah, I would say that the fact that France already created legislation on this repair score is probably an index of or an indication that the European Union will really come up with something that is also dealing with this. I will not go into the details of the French on this, the reparabilité, but if you want to have some information, I can share that with you later on. I have an overview of what it entails.
Yeah, maybe without going into detail, but can you tell us which product categories we're talking about mainly?
It's still unclear at this stage, but I would guess that electronics will be definitely into scope. Mobile phones, home appliances, TVs. I think you should see the right to repair next to the planned obsolescence issue, and try to draw parallels in there. So I guess that the products that are subject to this kind of issue would probably be in the scope of the right to repair, although we cannot know for sure yet.
And the digital product passport seems then to be a kind of precondition, right? Also to transport the information that is required by the right to repair or the due diligence proposal as well, right?
You can see it as that, but it should also be seen as a tool to facilitate compliance. I think it's something that the Commission will come up with that will be built, but also complemented over time based on new legislation appearing also on right to repair and so on. But of course, if it is about giving access to information about spare parts and software updates or anything that would be relevant for any actor in the repair sector, of course, if we have a digital product passport, that would simplify it a lot.
Okay, then maybe move on to the last one.
Yes.
For us. Yeah.
The consumers in the green transition and substantiating green claims. These are two interlinked proposals, although we are not really sure if there will be a fully fledged new proposal, the one on empowering consumers, because now it seems that it will be more a revision. It will be more done as a revision of the Consumer Rights Directive or the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. The objective of the initiative, let's call it like this, on empowering consumers would be addressing the lack of information, the fact that there is unreliable information, or the fact that there are practices that are preventing the contribution to the green transition by the consumers. There would be probably something about a safety net for green claims and specific measures on unfair practices. And here it comes again, the planned obsolescence. Interlinked with this proposal, we have the one on substantiating green claims, which would address the proliferation of methods and initiatives that are actually misleading environmental claims. And it could also go as far as requiring companies to substantiate green claims, making claims reliable, comparable, verifiable across the European Union through something that could be a common methodology or a certified label. Of course, both proposals would have an impact on web shops in terms of, information to consumers. It could be a challenge for merchants to comply. There could be also a challenge on the access to the information. And here again, the role of the digital product passport could actually be assessed and boosted to improve this access to information, basically. So these are the two proposals that we still expect in December 2021, unless there will be more delays in the European Commission, and that will definitely have an impact on the e-commerce industry, I guess.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Actually, maybe just the last question on the green claims. I mean, I think it's quite fair to have kind of level playing field, and you know, if my competitor makes a green claim, I can be sure that it's an honest claim and that he's really doing something for the environment. But is it already clear how the Commission will basically measure, or how they will measure that the green claim is justified?
As far as we know, the Commission is still assessing how to ensure that these environmental claims are reliable, trustworthy, but also comparable with each other, because it goes together with the ambition of fighting greenwashing. The assessment will result in this legislative proposal, which is expected in December. I think it is on the 14th. I mean, it's very difficult to say, but we can say maybe that we expect it to require companies either on a voluntary or a binding basis to rely on a single agreed methodology, which is called the environmental footprint methods. Because what the Commission is trying to do is to ensure harmonization and standardization of LCAs, so life cycle assessments, to help with consistency and comparability. Then we go much more into the details of what are environmental footprint methods, and I think maybe for time constraints, I will not try to do that at this moment, I guess. But I have information to share if somebody is requesting it, of course.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think there are a lot of interesting proposals in the pipeline that will have to wait and see what the Commission is finally doing with them. Thank you very much, Luca, for having shared all these insights from Brussels with us today. I think it would be really worth it to have these kind of exchanges again at one point in the future when we know more, just to see what direction the Commission proposals took, how they evolved, and also what this means for our sector. I would be very happy to welcome you and Juliette again at this occasion, and also obviously also our audience today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again at one of our other webinars during the Sustainability Week. And I'm wishing all of you a great end of the day, and see you soon.
Thank you very much for your attention. And if there are any questions, feel free to reach out via either via Aline or, of course, via our direct email address. Happy to catch up on these files. And thanks a lot for having invited me.
Thank you very much for coming.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.